everybody, it's me, Laura, the egg-centric egg lady, and today we're going to be doing my Derwent version of my Flax Flower Project. So right here, of course, I am penciling on the design onto my chicken eggshell, and I want to let you guys know the pencil I'm using is a Tombow fine pencil, and you can buy these singly. I know that I went to my Guyry store and I bought this pencil. I like it. It's kind of nice because it doesn't smudge as much as a regular 2B pencil. And I do have to say, when it comes to pencils, guys, you might want to look at or explore your pencils, your graphites. I find that the 2B is nice. I mean, it's your regular, well, not 2B, but your HB pencil. It works. We all get in the habit of using them. But sometimes I like going lighter. And so that's why I like to go up to like even my 4H or even my 2H. The fine is nice because I get a little bit of dark in there, and especially if I'm going to go in and I'm using just graphite and I'm not going to put in marker, then it's like, yeah, let's go with a little bit darker of a pencil graphite. So generally that's where I land. I land in the fine. I like their fine. It's real nice. I haven't tried some of the other types. I know like Faber has their own graphite pencils and so on, but that will be explored probably in the future here. So anyways, right here, I'm just kind of like putting in my little penciled version of our little Flax Flower project. Okay, so right here I'm starting to rough in my flax flowers, and you notice I started with the ribbon first, but the more I started getting into this design, I thought, wait a minute, I need to place down those flowers so I know where they're going to land. So definitely make sure when you rough it in first. Don't define up right away, because especially if you're starting with one element and you're like, oh, I like that ribbon, let's start to define. No, because if you don't get the other elements placed onto your eggshell, it might not quite look the way you want it to. Now here I'm going to also mention a little bit about drawing, and I'm going to say to each of you, from my, I go back to my college professor, Professor Gerizzo. I have to mention him. He always said that if you take 10 to 15 minutes out of your day to draw, you will maintain the level of skill that you have at that time. Now, that's good, but to get better, you need to, do a little bit more. So, if you have any kind of extra time where you could sit down and take an hour out of your day or whatever, you'll just get better and better when it comes to creating your drawing skills on eggshell. And this is very important because the better your sketch is, the better it's going to look at the very end of your project, no matter what it is, whether it's drawing on eggshell or paper or whatever. Anytime you invest into your drawing skills, it's going to show over time. All right, so I've put down most of my rough sketch here, and so now I'm going in and I'm darkening my line, giving me more of my final sketch. Make sure you go in with your eraser and take out any of your rough sketch marks that you don't want after you get done with your final sketch, because those will show through when you're doing colored pencil, not necessarily watercolor pencil or even with the Derwent Inktense, but when you really think about it, you want to make sure that in the end you have a very finalized and professional looking piece. Okay, so now for the fun part. Yes, I am bringing in my Derwent Inktense, my fuchsia, and I'm also bringing in my sun yellow. And these, oh, I absolutely love these pencils. Now, notice here, I'm putting down a little bit of that pencil pigment on the flower, okay? I start out pretty dark right at first, and notice I'm leaving just I'm putting down a little bit. I'm not putting down a ton. Now, mind you, I'm putting down more yellow, but you have to remember, you know, the thing is with color, your darker pigments will overshadow your lighter ones. So the lighter ones you might need a little bit more of. That's why I only have a little bit of my red down, or my fuchsia here in this case, than my yellow. I mean, I've got definitely more yellow, but I only need a little bit. I don't need a ton. So, you know, right here, I'm bringing in that red. Notice it's just right in that one area where it's fairly intense. Ah, no, bad joke, I know. But just a little bit. And the reason for that is because we're going to eventually bring in our brush, and you're going to see it does so much for this piece. So time to bring in our brush, and mind you, this is a little tiny brush, and I have just a small amount of water on here, a small amount. I prefer to have a more drier brush when I'm working on eggshell than a really wet one. And a lot of this is because if you have a ton of water, trying to get it, you know, you're just losing pigment then, you know, and you can't really control it as much. If you have a drier brush with just a little bit of wetness, then it's easier to control the pigment and where it flows. So that's why I do that. The other reason too is because I have this nice fuchsia along with this sun yellow, and we don't want that red or that fuchsia to take over everything. In fact, when you go in and you start doing this, I suggest bringing your wash down from your lighter color into your darker one. because you're going to blend up naturally. It's going to blend. Those two colors are going to, in fact, when I did this, I was like, okay, that's really not the pigment pink type that I thought I was going to get. I got more of a red. You can really see it come through here. It becomes more red. So keep that in mind when you're blending these particular pencils as well, because that was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought, oh, I'm gonna get this particular red color. No, this became more of, and a lot of it was that blend. It was that yellow. You bring that yellow in, the red, the fuchsia was very much a blue red. And when I brought in that yellow, it changed it up entirely. I liked it, but it was just like, okay, this is something to keep in mind when you do your blending, especially with your watercolor pencils. Okay, so right here I'm going to start bringing in my greens. So I have an apple green and I have a leaf green. And I'm going to go ahead and color in my leaves right here. I'm not going to place water on them quite yet. I really need to finish up the rest of my flowers, and I do suggest doing that. In fact, actually, I might have been a little bit premature here. I probably should have waited and just finished up all my flowers with the pigment. And when you do put the pigment down, use a brush to brush it off. Now, when I went ahead and I started going back in and adding in a little bit more of this water to these particular flowers down at the bottom, notice here I used my paper to kind of like take off any extra water. I had gotten a little bit too much, too much water in my brush, and I thought, yeah, we need to make sure, and I didn't like how it was flowing, so I thought, guess what, maybe take off a little bit here and there because it's getting too dark. I'm losing too much of my yellow. And again, if you feel like you're losing too much of your yellow, put more yellow down, but bring that more into your pink area. Okay, so now we're going to bring in the water on our leaves, and remember I use mainly a dry brush because I want to be able to, control that pigment where it goes. And I added in a little bit there on the bottom. I was like, okay, it's a little bit too wet. So I drug up some of my dark pigment into the lighter one, but I thought, okay, I'm losing my light. So I brought in my apple green again, and I thought, let's fill it in just a little bit more and bring my brush in. And when I brush it up against my line, look at that. You get this really nice green, you get this lightness in the leaf, and you get a nice defined line running up with your pigment all along, where you drew that particular leaf. Now you'll find that when I did that, it was really nice. It was very smooth. It was very different from what I did with the flowers. So if you like that look better, try that with the flowers as well. Okay, so now we're going to start working the oval background, and I'm using my ink black here. So I'm using my black, right, on the background. Now, we're putting down just a little bit. Notice I'm not going to fill in this entire oval with this pigment because this thing is going to spread, and I don't want it to be dark black. You don't want that. You want it to be just a shade, just to give yourself the feel of like it's either inside this darkened oval area, almost a three-dimensional kind of a thing, or where it's just got a nice background for you. So I put a little bit down where I'm really kind of bearing down more of that pigment right around the edge, right where your line is. But on the inside of this oval, I'm not going to fill in a ton because we're going to spread that pigment with our brush. Okay, so I'm bringing in my brush now, and I will have to admit I started out with a lot more water. And the reason is because this is a fairly big area, and I want to spread that pigment around pretty well. Now you are going to have to work around your flowers, but it gives you a feel like these flowers are sitting inside a special space just meant for those. So keep that in mind when you're going ahead and you're spreading this around. You're just really creating a shadowed area that's meant to really just highlight these flowers. And I'm spreading, like I said, the pigment gets lighter as you're coming in towards the flowers. So a lot of your darkness is going to stay right up, right along your drawn pencil edge. So I've really kind of come in and really filled in most of this oval, but the thing that really bugged me was that I didn't have a really darkened line to go off of. I had pulled most of my pigment of my black into this grayish-like area. So I need to go back in and I put a little bit more black down right along that edge, and it really made this whole area pop. Remember, you need to have a little bit of contrast, because when you bring in a little bit of contrast, especially with like a black here, and you're putting this against a nice kind of ovaled area with a little bit of grayish area, you want to make sure it pops out enough so it really does grab your attention. So that's why I like to darken my line right along the edge. Okay, so now we're going to start working on our ribbon area, and I'm using my sea blue here, and notice here right at the point before it flares out on that ribbon, that's where I'm putting my pigment. And the idea here is that you're going to start really dark in that point area and then just bring out more and more of the pigment into the larger, unrestrained or untapered area of your ribbon. So just at the points, and then we'll come back in with our brush and then draw out that pigment. All right, so now I'm bringing in my brush, and I had a little bit too much water here, so I have to, make sure you have that paper nearby. It just takes out the little extra excess you might not necessarily need, because I just wanted to have a hint of that blue coming through and setting it off against that background. Okay, so on this one part of the ribbon, there was just too much pigment there. So again, The nice thing about these Inktense pencils is that you can take your brush and with a little bit of water, you can lift up the pigment as well as just putting down. So if you think it's too dark, come in with your water and lift up some of the pigment from the shell and you'll get it to the point where you really like it. Okay, so again, I'm bringing in my Tombow graphite pencil, my fine, and I'm going to darken up my line on this eggshell. Now, at this point, you could just say, you know, I like it the way it is. I don't want to darken in a ton of line. And you can do that. It's, you know, remember when you're creating, you know, on these eggshells, the choice is up to you. Just because I do it one way does not necessarily mean you have to follow along. So if you really like it the way it is, then go with that. But see, when I'm bringing in the line like I am here, it does give a nice defined edge, especially with that oval background. I mean, maybe you just do it on parts and portions of the shell. And I definitely suggest try doing that. You might like that better. I just decided, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do the whole thing. But I look at it now and I'm kind of like, maybe I should have just left it the way it was when it came to the flowers, because I will go in on the flowers here and I'm going to use my graphite line to define them up. Now, even though I'm going in and I'm darkening my line, maybe when you darken your line, you don't do it really dark. I really liked the fine, you know, this fine pencil because it gave me a nice dark line where I wanted it. Okay, so I do like this the way it is, but we're going to go ahead and darken our line down, and I'll show you why I like it so much when I do darken. I think it's because of the detail. Not long ago I took a complete actual watercolor class, and I didn't like it at all. And I think it was because we didn't really go in and we didn't really define the image that we were doing. It was strictly on different techniques that you could do, and the image to me was rough. I didn't feel like I had a nice defined image. And I love detail. Gosh, do I love detail. So, you know, if you really like detail and you love to do that sort of thing, then you're going to probably want to come back in either with your marker, or in this case here, I've got my nice darkened pencil, and, you know, darken in your line, bring it in. And if you want to, maybe vary it up. It doesn't have to all be darkened in. You can use a little bit here, a little bit there, and that does add some interest to the image itself. Now you'll notice here I brought in my eraser pencil by Faber, and I have to admit I like that particular eraser pencil. Part of it is just because it will give you a really tiny point for erasing, and some of my other erasers just don't quite do that. I mean, a kneaded eraser would do that, but this is kind of a nice way in which, okay, I want something quick and I don't want to, the backside of a regular eraser. I want something that's a little bit more detailed, or smaller, that it will go into tiny areas like on Eggshell and give me that tiny erased area without erasing too much. Okay, so here's another reason why I'm going to give you when it comes to adding in detail to the watercolored areas. I like to have a little bit of, maybe I've got some pattern I want to place into these flowers. And right here, it may seem like a very simple thing, but look at this. I'm making these little indents into the flower itself, giving it the sense of like, okay, that's one particular petal and not just an overall flower piece. You give it a sense of like, okay, there's a little bit more of a rippling effect to the petal, or there's a little bit more of that sort of thing going on. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and I'm defining up the line on my ribbon, and in this case it really was necessary. What can I say? Anytime you get it down to where it's just one single line, go back in with your graphite or your marker and define it, because otherwise you kind of get lost in that background. So there is something to be said for adding in that detail. I have to say, just maybe it's just a judgment call. Judgment call on how much you want when it comes to that detail. And right here you're going to notice too, I go back and forth not only between my graphite pencil, but my brush and so on, just kind of picking up details and maybe taking a little bit away, using my eraser where I need to, just defining up your image to the point where you really like it and we can move on. Okay, so now I'm bringing in my water-based varnish, and when it comes to varnishing over on watercolor, especially with these pencils, and I would say this really applies to any watercolor image, you have to do it very, use a little bit of varnish. Like you see how I'm really kind of taking the excess off on that bottle? Take the excess off and then one stroke on the image. One stroke and you're done. So one and done, as I always put it. And if you have to touch it up a little bit, do so, but do it quickly and not a lot of varnish. And notice here, I'm going just over my flower area. I'm not bothering with the background so much, but the flower area. I found that the grays and my blacks and stuff didn't necessarily matter too much, but any kind of pigmented piece, so like if you got your yellows and your reds and your blues, see right there, it likes to go. And even though I had one little brush there, take another brush or one that isn't really affected, and just brush it kind of back into where that flower was. But again, I would say, I stress highly when you're putting this varnish on, one stroke, one and done. Because you need to let this varnish I'm using is actually very fast drying. So if I let it dry, this way then the pigment underneath it is set. you don't have to worry about it as much. You don't have to worry about your hands like, oh no, I've got this pigment on my hands as well, or it's coming off, or it's wearing, wearing away, whatever the cause may be for where your pigment might come up. In this case, you put the varnish down like one stroke, you let it dry, and then I will have to say I come back in and I'll put another like one stroke and done so that it's sealed well, and that even though if I come back in with some more varnish, it's not going to matter because it's already sealed. So if I want to really get a nice seal all the way around this egg, I'm going to probably go one or two coats at least, just one or two coats, that would probably be good. One or two coats of this little water-based varnish to make sure it's sealed in the areas I want it to be sealed. And then once I have that pretty much set and it's all dried, come back in with your varnish and do the overall coating. But at this point, I would say just do the front side of the egg. Do not do the other back side of where the ribbon is. This is where, it makes it easier to handle. You can put it down, and if you do have to touch it, you can at least touch the back side. So this way then you're not having to worry about messing up that varnish. All right, so by now I've gotten at least one or two coatings right over the areas that I wanted. And once I have that, I'm just going to go ahead and do a nice full coat around on the oval itself and let it dry. All right, now that the front part is all dried up, you can handle it now. You don't have to worry about it. Here again, I'm also like, okay, I need to add in a little bit more. I forgot to put in my checker. So make sure you put that in before you varnish it over. If you want to have any kind of darkened area, make sure your design is finished up to where you like it before you put that varnish down. Because trying to go back in after you varnished, not really an advisable type of thing. Okay, so you can see here I am adding in that checker all the way around this oval. That's eventually what I'm going to be doing here. And in doing so, I'm going to have to varnish over this. So this will add in another coat over the overall coat on the front side. I am not varnishing the back side yet. I like to have at least one area of my egg that is dry so that I can handle it well. Okay, so I've finished up that checker and I've got it all set. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and bring in that varnish. And like I said earlier here, I just wanted to make sure that that was all sealed in. And take the ribbon, in this case, that's around that oval, most of it, and seal it as well if you can. Remember, one and done. So one swipe and it should be okay. Okay, so the front side is all nice and dry now, and as I started working the back, I thought, you know what, I want to add in a flower. I want to mimic a little bit of my front side. So I came back in with my own flower. Notice I didn't even do a rough sketch there. And really, the more you practice doing these flowers, eventually you can do the same thing. You won't need to do a rough sketch. You could just draw it in natural and go from there. All right, so we're going to color in this flower, but I'm going to let you guys watch my hands talk as I do so, and then we're going to go right into our results on our Flax Flower project done with our DERWENT Inktense pencils. All right, so here's the result of using my Derwent Inktense pencils on this particular eggshell design. And I really loved the results, guys. I hope you will try this out and see what happens. And if you liked this video, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I'm always wondering what you're thinking. Otherwise, from the Eggcentric Egg Lady, I am sending out my biggest hugs to each of you, and I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day.